Blackbeard's shields are paper thin, he moves slower than a beached whale, and his guns do as much damage as jabbing your enemies with thumbtacks. All of these statements are true, but what if I told you they're also what makes Blackbeard an insanely good operator? Blackbeard has a terrible reputation, maybe even the worst of all the operators in the entire game, but today I'm going to be bringing nothing but cold hard facts and logic to prove that he is a viable pick and can even be one of the best options to pick in the right circumstances. There are so many misconceptions about Blackbeard, but the truth behind his abilities lies in understanding his strengths and weaknesses to give yourself the best chances of being useful. But if you're playing him the wrong way, which we'll cover in this video, then I can see why you might think that he is literally f***ing terrible. Now firstly, how can these negative traits actually make him good? With paper thin shields, being extremely slow, and having bad guns, we've framed Blackbeard as literal dog shit. But the truth is, these three aspects of Blackbeard are not the problem. I'm not saying he's some miracle operator, but the downsides of Blackbeard are completely misunderstood. His weaknesses instead come from poor choices in playstyle, your positioning, and how he affects your teammates' mentality. Of course, having better guns, a stronger shield, and some more speed would make him even better, but as an operator, he can still be incredibly strong just the way that he is. So let's forget everything we thought we knew about Blackbeard for the next 10 minutes or so and give him the fair chance he deserves. First, let's start with the most common misconception about Blackbeard. His shields are too weak. Each shield has a 20 HP limit, with the shield having the power to tank an entire bullet no matter how much damage it does. Essentially, Blackbeard has 2 get out of free jail cards for his skull, as long as the bullet isn't coming from the top side or back of him, obviously. If you're only referring to the direct HP of the shields, then yes, they are weak, but in terms of the ability that they provide him, they can be the difference between life and death. The biggest contributing factor as to whether you survive or die is all a matter of perspective though. This comes down to whether or not the enemies can see your shield before they see your head. In the case where they can, you are very likely dead because they'll start shooting as they see the shield, and by the time your head follows it, the bullets will already be on their way through the air, soon to be in the back of your skull. If we can identify how this perspective works though, we can attempt to avoid it and avoid this situation from happening. Here's a very simple lesson on perspective. Essentially, the closer you are to an angle, the more of your body that shows, while the further back you are from an angle, the less of you that shows. That's why sometimes when you're holding an angle super close up, you'll die without even seeing the other person. This isn't the game being bad, it's just how perspective works in the real world. With Blackbeard though, this effect is amplified even more because of the width of his shield. If you peek an angle very close, a ton of the shield is going to be sticking out and showing before the rest of you, and you'll be an easy kill for the defenders. This is part of why playing on windows is so outdated and bad. If a defender swings you, they'll see a ton of the shield, and by the time you try to react, your shield will have been broken and you'll already be dead. Of course, this didn't matter when his shield quite literally had 800 HP, but when it only takes a bullet or two to destroy, it's terrible. Going off that logic, the shields are obviously going to be bad when the defenders get these opportunities, so how do we avoid it? Well, we entry, baby. Playing an entry style with Blackbeard, getting into the building and swinging onto the defenders will instantly give you an advantage. Not only are you moving, making your face a harder target to hit, but you won't be getting your shit rocked by a 3-speed with 100 ping. This then gives you the peeker's advantage in terms of both latency and perspective. This way you can also pick up on those perspective advantages, moving into angles from a distance instead of close up against them. In this circumstance, the shields are no longer weak, but an extra layer of protection, and even more importantly, added time in each gunfight. This guarantees a higher time to kill because they have to land a second headshot on you, or maybe a third depending on what gun they're using. In this situation, you can confidently peek angles with an extra coating of safety that will pay off more times than it won't. Not only does this keep you safer, but it's single-handedly one of the most annoying things to experience as a defender. Getting into a gunfight and losing it solely because of a Blackbeard shield is hands down the #1 tilt factor in Rainbow Six. And that's not weakness. That's power, baby. The other thing you must realize is how being alive affects the game. Being alive and holding an area creates pressure. It also keeps information alive. The second that you die, your team loses both control and pressure. But staying alive and maintaining that control forces defenders to dedicate resources to that area, whether putting utility for it or committing an entire player to watching it. This in turn creates weaknesses in other areas that your teammates can exploit. Simply the fact of surviving with a Blackbeard shield, whether whether it gets you a kill or not is an inherent advantage. It allows you to maintain that pressure or even go big for your team later in the round. There also seems to be a favorable number of people playing Blackbeard that love windows. They love rappelling on or just sitting outside a window, along with bringing claymores to stop the jump outs. It looks pretty nice on the surface, but this is arguably the worst way to play Blackbeard, and if you're playing him like this, I would not only recommend that you stop, but it would also assume that you're in a low rank if this is actually working for you. Like I mentioned before, a swinging defender should kill you 9 times out of 10, but the only time this window play would really work is if you do it sneakily to try and get a quick kill. Opening up a small slit in a barricade is great for this. That way you might be able to shoot someone in the back and be on your way. Overall though, the low health shields, the perspective issues, and the complete lack of mobility while posted up on a window are guaranteed death in any higher ranked lobby. The claymores also completely remove any hopes of playmaking ability, and it's just a waste of a pick for your team. The flashbangs or grenades, on the other hand, might be the perfect complement to the entry playstyle that you should be using anyway. First, let's talk about flashbangs. Flashbangs are very strong, especially on isolated defenders that you have information on. If you know where they are and they have nobody to help them, you can flashbang them, making them completely blind, and then collect a free kill. They're also fantastic from a team perspective, allowing you to burn ADSs, Wamai discs, and Aruni gates so your teammates can use explosives to destroy bulletproof utility. And they're great for sound cover or blinding an enemy for your teammate. Flashbangs have a variety of uses that are all very strong and can be used at your discretion throughout the round to deal with issues as they arise. With Blackbeard though, they are a little weaker than with other ops. Because of his slow movement speed with the shield, it's difficult to capitalize off of blind defenders, having to switch to the deagle to get in quick and take them out. This of course is an added risk that only really applies to him. But what about grenades? Does he have this added disadvantage with them too? Well, it's actually the opposite. Grenades are even more ideal on Blackbeard than everyone else. Ever since they became uncookable, grenades are best used for forcing defenders out of positions and making them move. You can then shoot the defender as they attempt to evade the grenade, making for a useful utility that isn't stupidly overpowered like it was previously. Thanks to Blackbeard, when doing this, you have the added buff of the shield protecting you, so not only do they have to run from the grenade and fight you, but headshotting you is also more difficult. This is just a shitfest for any defender who has to deal with it. What a f***ing loser. Look at this f***ing loser dying. Dead loser boy. Loser, loser, loser. Take the elbows, oh Fortnite dance. Fortnite dance loser. But the grenades are also ideal in BB's loadout because they give him destruction capabilities, which is a huge asset to have. Using a grenade to open a soft hatch, destroy a bulletproof camera, or get a castle barricade open can be the difference between a round won and a round lost. Because he is so slow moving, wasting time rotating around the map is less than ideal, so it's just better to use one of these grenades to make a new entrance if it's needed. Especially now that grenades are weaker, it's not going to be a dramatic waste of utility to use them on things like hatches. Unless you have a teammate right beside you that has a secondary shotgun, then in that case, wasting the grenade would make you a f***ing idiot. The last perk of running the grenades though is that they're ideal for isolating gunfights. Throwing a grenade at one angle and then peeking onto another is how you can take a crossfire and turn it into a one-on-one gunfight. The grenades force the defenders to push back off their angle, which gives you the space to fight the other one. This exact same concept can be used to enter onto the site by clearing one angle with a grenade and looking at another as you push in. This is a fundamental strategy of the game that is so easy to do, yet so extremely effective. Too many times I watch people with 2 grenades or 3 flashbangs in their pocket, and instead of using them to get aggressive, they just try to bait for kills and inevitably die or run out of time. When you have no other options or need a Hail Mary play to try and win out the round, use your utility to make something happen. You'll have a much better chance of pulling out the win. At this point, we should have a pretty good idea of the ideal way to play Blackbeard. By being mobile, avoiding perspective mishaps, and having the grenades for some great playmaking abilities, Blackbeard is way better when used as an aggressive entry rather than a passive cross holder posted up in one spot. The other great part of playing him in this mobile fashion, entering in for your team, is that the enemies won't see it coming. If you're posted up in one spot, they're gonna know where the Blackbeard's at, and that will give them time to think about how to deal with you, whether it's completely ignoring you, C4ing you, or swinging right in front of your face. But when you play him the right way, they're not going to be consistently prepared for the BB shield to be swinging around the corner at them, and it's going to be much more effective. But Blackbeard isn't perfect, and like I mentioned at the start of this video, he has his problems. They're just a little different than what people might think. Honestly, the worst part about him is that it's very hard to justify a Blackbeard pick to your team. If they think that BB sucks, you're not going to be able to change their mind, and that lack of team confidence is actually a really big weakness. If your team thinks you're being an idiot by picking Blackbeard, they're less likely to drone you in or work with you, and they're more likely to get tilted and think that you're throwing. And if you can avoid this tilt in your team by not picking Blackbeard, then everyone's gonna play better. And as we know, playing with tilt is one of the worst things you can do. Even if you pick the best operators or use the best strategies, if you're tilted, you're gonna be much less effective. And when something goes wrong, which it always does in Siege, you're not gonna be equipped mentally to deal with it, and you're going to lose. On the bright side, if your team doesn't tilt from the Blackbeard pick and you do well on BB, then there's a high likelihood that you tilt the other team, making your job even easier for the rest of the game. The other weak point though is his guns. It's true, they are some of the weakest guns out of all the attackers. It's not too big of a deal because the extra time from his shield averages it out, and if you land a headshot, you're pretty much always gonna win the gunfight. That being said, his entire ability is designed around getting kills, and when you have some of the worst guns in the game, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. This boy could definitely use some new guns to boost him up just a little bit, because sometimes those dog shit weapons are really what the problem is. Hey, now don't you go straight to the comments calling me a hypocrite. I said at the start of this video his guns were trash, and that doesn't negate the fact that he can still be really good. Part of picking BB is understanding when the ideal time to pick him is. If you're getting smoked in every gunfight and need that little bit of extra time to get the upper edge, then Blackbeard is the best option. When your gun skill is outmatched by the enemy team, a one-off Blackbeard pick will not only improve your chances of winning those fights, but there's a good chance it will tilt them in the process too. This can single-handedly turn a match around, and it's not to be slept on. When you're getting completely bent over and dominated by the other team, a Blackbeard pick is what you need. This specific moment is when he becomes the best operator in Rainbow Six. The thing is, Blackbeard is a frustration point for many players. He's the only operator that rejects you from kills you should have gotten as a defender, and that feeling of not getting a kill even after hitting a nasty shot is straight up awful. If your teammates play him, you sometimes feel like they're being a useless team member, and you'd rather them play anyone else that can bring utility to help. This isn't ideal for anyone really, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point Ubisoft reworked him completely. My advice for now at least would be to support your teammates. If you see them picking Blackbeard, tell them to go crazy, hype them up, and drone them in. Try to at least convince them to pick up the entry and support them however they need. Clearly that's the best way this operator can be used, and it will give you your best chances of making that Blackbeard pick actually useful. At the end of the day, it all comes down to maximizing your opportunities while lowering your risk, and while there are opportunities out there for Blackbeard, he's always going to be a little bit risky.